So the first rankings from the College Football Playoff Committee were released tonight, a little over an hour ago. Let's just briefly do a reaction to them. I haven't seen them yet. I just pulled them up on my computer, and I'm going to give you some of my initial thoughts on these rankings. Now, granted, none of this means anything, because I don't think Ohio State was even in the top 10 in the first College Football Playoff rankings, and they ended up winning that year, I'm pretty sure, the inaugural year of the College Football Playoffs. So, none of this means anything right now, but it's just fun to give it a little bit of a reaction and talk about it. So we'll start off with number one. We'll go from top to bottom, basically through all the relevant teams. Number one, Georgia. That's not surprising whatsoever. Everyone had that. Everyone anticipated that. If you were surprised by that, then I'm sorry. But what have you been watching with what have you been doing with your Saturdays? I mean, Georgia has dominated basically every opponent they come to this year. The opening weekend against Clemson. Now that Clemson hasn't been performing so well, it doesn't look so good. But back when the Tigers were healthy, they held Georgia to 10 points. Since then, the Bulldogs have scored, their lowest score since then is 30 points against Kentucky, the 11th ranked team in the country at the time. So they've beaten the number 3 ranked team in the country when Clemson was ranked at the time. The number 6 team in the country, that's number 8, Arkansas. They beat them 37-0. They shut them out. They beat 18 Auburn, who's been pretty good recently, 34-10. They beat number 11 Kentucky 30-13, and they recently beat a talented Florida program 34-7. So, at this point, they're just rolling over everyone. And let's be honest, the Bulldogs, their defense right now is so insane. They have so many future NFL players on that roster that are going to get drafted this coming year and the year after that. They might have 3 safeties get drafted this year. That's how talented their roster is currently. Darion Kendrick, Walker up front, Jacoby Dean, everyone. Jordan Davis, of course, and so many more. Nolan Smith. Who else am I missing? There's one more player. I can't believe I'm missing now. There's another edge rusher and there's another interior defensive lineman, I think, on that roster that are going to be good enough to draft this year. So Georgia, to me, being up here is just not even shocking whatsoever. Adam Anderson, there we go. That's who I was looking for. So they have so many talented pieces right now. And I can't imagine any team other than Georgia. Devontae Wyatt as well. So that's the other defensive lineman I was thinking about. But they're so talented, I can't imagine anyone other than Georgia being number 1 in the first poll. This is absolutely right. That was the easy part. Let's go on number 2, Alabama. I agree with this as well. Alabama so far this year, their loss to Texas A&M, which is a surprise, but they beat talented Tennessee program, even though Tennessee hung with them up until the second half of the fourth quarter. They crushed Mississippi State. They beat Ole Miss pretty convincingly. Ole Miss was number 12 in the nation at the time. They beat Florida, who was the number 11 in the nation at the time, barely, 31-29. And they beat Miami, who was number 14 in their opening game, 44-13. We'll learn a lot more about Alabama as we get closer to the college football playoffs. Because as I said, they beat Tennessee, but Tennessee was with them at halftime. They lost to Texas A&M, and they barely beat Florida. So, while they have that win against Mississippi State, Alabama looks vulnerable this year. And in terms of looking at their schedule, what they've done so far, not a number of great wins out there. Beating Ole Miss the way they did was actually a really good win. That was probably the best win on their schedule so far. But then Auburn came out and beat them this past weekend. So, Ole Miss has 2 losses, one to Bama, one to Auburn. Auburn, an underrated program in my opinion so far. And they're at 13 though on this ranking right now. So 13 is pretty good actually for Auburn. And of course, Alabama faces Auburn eventually. They place LSU, then New Mexico State, then Arkansas, who was at one time ranked pretty high in the country, and then Auburn before they get into the kind of postseason of college football. So we're going to learn a little bit more about Alabama. They're 2 right now, and I agree with them being second. But I think they're more vulnerable than people realize. Number 3. Number 3 was kind of surprising me that Michigan State would be that high. Maybe I shouldn't be surprised, but they have that win. They barely pulled out against Michigan this past weekend, 37-33. Michigan was number 6 in the country at that time. Again, I'm talking about the AP poll here for the national rankings versus the college football poll, or college football committee's official rankings that came out tonight. So a little bit different there, but Michigan State has beat Miami. They've beaten everyone they played so far, actually. They're undefeated. But they beat Michigan, obviously, it's their big win. They beat Indiana, but only by 5 points. They beat Nebraska, but that went to overtime. They beat Miami 38-17. Everyone seems to have beaten Miami this year. I like the Michigan State squad, and I hope they pull it out. I hope they go undefeated for the year, and I hope they go into the college football playoffs. But, it just seems highly unlikely compared to some of the really talented programs out there that they're going to hold on to this ranking. And I was a little surprised to have them this high up. Granted, they just had the biggest win of their season, and they are undefeated, so it makes sense to have them that high. But the other undefeated programs out there are Cincinnati, Oklahoma, who's at number 9, Wake Forest, we're going at 8, sorry. Wake Forest undefeated at 9. I understand that beating Michigan is probably the best win that any of these undefeated programs have had so far. Cincinnati 8-0 at 6. But you're hanging your season all in one game so far, so all those programs, it's kind of interesting to see how it's going to play out. And I'm not really buying into all of them yet, or any of them yet, to be honest. And Michigan State does have an interesting end of the season schedule here. Get Purdue. Purdue can be tricky sometimes. They get Maryland, and then it's Ohio State and Penn State to end their regular season before they go into the conference championship game in the conference playoffs. So, that's going to be interesting to see how they finish this year off. Obviously, they're going to move up and down the rankings based on how they play against Ohio State and how they play against Penn State. I don't think a one-loss Michigan State team is going to make the college football playoffs. I'll be just honest with you. I don't think one-loss Michigan State, I don't think a two-loss Alabama team are going to make the college football playoffs. So we'll start there. Number 4, Oregon. Another surprise for me. I don't know why I was so surprised by these rankings, but perhaps because the AP poll has been so different. But the College Football Playoff Committee puts Oregon at number 4. Oregon, of course, has beaten Ohio State. That's their marquee win of the season. They beat them by 7, 35-28. That was the time when the sky was falling for Ohio State. They've since turned things around quite a bit. And the only loss Oregon has is to Stanford in an overtime game. Since then, they've beaten Cal, but only by 7 points. They beat UCLA, but only by 3 points. And they recently crushed Colorado. So I think that putting Oregon this high, I can understand seeing Oregon in the top 7. I am a little surprised that they are all the way up at number 4. I don't know who I would necessarily put. Actually, I don't know who I would really put ahead of them because Ohio State's in number 5, and they beat Ohio State in the head-to-head. So it's hard to justify putting Ohio State ahead of Oregon, even though I think I would if you had to ask me for the 4 best programs from the top 5 teams on this board, which is Georgia, Alabama, Michigan State, Oregon, and Ohio State. Well, I might throw out Michigan State, but it'd come down to throwing out either Michigan State or Oregon. I'm putting Ohio State in that grouping of being one of the best teams in the country. So I think even though Oregon holds the head-to-head, I think Ohio State's a better team, and we're going to see that as the season goes on. So right now, Oregon, they've been gifted a top 4 spot. How do they hold on to it? They just have to win out. That's all I can do. If you lose another game, Oregon, you're done. You're not making the college football playoffs. You have to win out. And they face Washington, then Washington State, then Utah, then Oregon State for the rest of their regular season. Washington should be an easy win based on how they played this year. Same with Washington State. Utah is going to be the difficult one. So will Oregon State. Those won't be as easy as you anticipate. Oregon State right now is having a pretty good year at 5-3, but they have a chance to pull some upsets off. Washington, like I said, should be a pushover. Washington State, I think they should win that game as well. But if you're Oregon, you cannot afford to lose at all. And speaking of can't afford to lose, number 6, Cincinnati. Oh boy. I know a lot of people from Cincinnati, or a lot of people who are Bearcat fans who are always pulling for the Bearcats. And they always say, there's no chance they're actually going to put them in the college football playoffs. I'm like, no, this will be your year. Trust me, you're going to make it this year. And I end up 6th in the initial poll. Now, granted, as I said, this means absolutely nothing because it's all going to change. But it doesn't bode well that Cincinnati, undefeated Cincinnati right now, is number 6 in the college football poll behind a couple one-loss teams. Now, granted, like I said, Michigan State, Oregon, they have chances to lose here, and they'll probably fall behind Cincinnati at that point. But the Bearcats right now, 1 win against a ranked team that I can see on their schedule so far. That's the game against Notre Dame. That was a 24-13 win. Notre Dame has since, of course, fallen off quite a bit themselves. And Notre Dame's had quite a few problems themselves, but they are 10 in the college football poll. So I guess you got to win over number 10. You're at number 6. I guess. I mean, that doesn't make a ton of sense to me. I would have had them a little bit higher if you get a win against number 10. But then again, you're running into Ohio State and Oregon above you, which is, again, you can't really jostle those two down that far. Maybe you drop Ohio State, but Ohio State is clearly, by far, the better team than Cincinnati. So, what are you supposed to do about that? It's very interesting. The Bearcats are a super talented team. They have a lot of NFL draft prospects, but not nearly as many as an Ohio State team does. Ohio State has draft picks this year. They have draft picks for next year. They have draft picks the year after that. So does Alabama. So does Georgia. The Bearcats just don't have that. So, well, I think they definitely have an argument for being a top 4 team. I don't think they're going to be able to match up as well as, I don't know who else would throw in there, honestly. I really don't. I'm not a huge fan of Oklahoma or Michigan, if I'm being honest. But the Bearcats face Tulsa, South Florida, SMU, and East Carolina to finish their season. I mean, there's really not a lot you can do. You can just go undefeated. If you lose, obviously you're out. But if you go undefeated, even right now, sitting at 6, some of these teams might knock each other off along the way. If Georgia beats Alabama, maybe Alabama gets knocked out. If we're talking about going to maybe the SEC postseason. But after that, I mean, maybe Michigan comes back. Oh, not Michigan comes back. Maybe Michigan State will run into Ohio State somewhere along the line. And those two will kind of knock each other out and make room for Cincinnati. That's your best course of action right now. If you're a Bearcat fan, just hope that these teams from the SEC and the Big Ten clash and create room for you in the top 4. Because as of right now, you can win out and still be stuck at 6 or still be stuck outside the top 4. So if you're a Bearcat fan, you can't be feeling too good right now. And speaking of feeling not too good right now, Oklahoma Sooners. It's deserving. You're deserving to be this low. I'm sorry, but you don't deserve to be much higher than was it number 8? I believe they have you. Yeah, 8. Michigan at 7. Michigan at 7, and Oklahoma at number 8. It's just there's not much I can say about it. Oklahoma is a good program, but once I get their actual schedule up here, they know they've had issues and they continue to have problems because they've gotten through some wins. They pulled some tough wins out, but you gotta look at who they're playing. I mean, they have some really close calls against programs they should really be blowing out. And that's why you're down at number, let's say 7. I keep forgetting number 8. There's just no way you beat Tulane by 5 points. And granted, I know you changed quarterbacks. You have a really good quarterback who's better than Spencer Rattler right now at the helm. And you got Spencer Rattler as your backup. So you've got a really good QB situation. But you beat Nebraska by 7. You beat Tulane by 5. You beat Kansas State by 6. You beat West Virginia by 3. You beat Texas by 7. You beat Kansas by, well, at the end, 12 points, but that was a very close game for most of the contest. You can't have all those close wins and still be sitting here at 8-0 and think, oh, well, we're good enough to be, or at 9-0 and think we're good enough to be a top 4 team. You're just not right now. So, and then there's Wake Forest atop the ACC at 8-0, sitting at number 9. I mean, I don't want to make this video too long, because as it is probably going this long, it's going to decrease the number of views I get on it. But Wake Forest, I can just say there's a talent difference. There's an inherent talent difference between a program like Wake Forest and everyone else here in the top 10. I mean, I could say almost the same thing about Michigan State being in the top 4. There's a talent difference between Michigan State and the other teams in the top 4. I could say there's a talent difference between Georgia and every other team in the top 4. But really, that's what's going to ultimately, I think, play a huge role coming down the stretch here. It's just evaluating the depth of these programs and the talent of these programs, because there's a lot of high-end talent here among these top 10 programs. And it's pretty clear right now that the top 5, maybe the top 6, have the best high-end talent. But of that group, Ohio State, Alabama, and Georgia have the most future professional players. And that could ultimately play a huge role here as we get through the last half of the season and then into the conference championship games. But for now, I'm done talking. This has gone longer than I wanted to. I'll probably post some shorter videos as well. But for now, talk to you guys all later.